Tales of the Caribbean, Witches and Duppies. This story might be a bit scary for small children. So, if you scare easily, maybe you should wait for the next video. Many years ago, all over the world, if an old woman was ugly and lived alone, she was often called a witch by her neighbors. In the Caribbean, the word for witchcraft is obia, and witches are often called obia women. But an old higg is even worse. Old Martha didn't know how to make ends meet. She lived in a small village named Cocory in the mountains about 30 miles east of Port of Spain, Trinidad. The people there made a living by growing oranges and grapefruit, yams and potatoes, and things like that. Some of them had a pig or chickens or even a cow. Some had relatives down in Port of Spain who sent them money from time to time. Old Martha had no land, no pigs or chickens, and had no relatives. Her son was dead, and her grandchildren had gone to America. She had no way to make ends meet, so she became a witch. Being a witch is not easy. You can't just put up a sign saying witch and charge people $1 for coming to see you. Other people had to believe you are a witch, and they had to believe it so strongly that when you deny it, when you say, "No, I am not a witch," they will think you're lying. It helped that Martha was old and ugly. She had worked all her life, so she was bent and shriveled and skinny, with skin like a withered prune. She had never been able to afford to go to the dentist in Port of Spain, so she only had one tooth remaining. One finger on her left hand was gone, cut off in an accident, and one eyelid hung lower than the other and twitched all the time for no reason. That she was ugly wasn't her fault, but she had some peculiar habits. She had lived alone for a long time, so she would talk to herself or to people long since gone, people who weren't there. She would wobble around the village, talking to such people, arguing, discussing, or even shrieking with laughter at some remembered joke. One day, the women of the village were on their way to the river to wash their clothes, carrying their laundry pans on their heads. They passed old Martha talking to a cotton tree. Miriam, who knew everything, reminded the others that a cotton tree is full of spirits. As they washed their clothes, the women talked among themselves. Why was Martha talking to the cotton tree? Which spirit was she talking to? Could it even be an evil spirit? Someone else said she had seen Martha 2 days before eating a cocoa leaf. Someone else had noticed a bottle with a strange colored liquid hanging from a pole outside Martha's hut. Then Miriam said there was no doubt about it. Old Martha was a witch. One of the children heard the women talking about this and told the others. Old Martha was a witch. So the children of the village began to follow her around, teasing and tormenting her. They called her duppy, obia woman, and old higg. They made fun of her tattered clothes, her stoop, her one tooth, and of the eyelid twitching over one eye. When Martha got angry with them, they ran away. One day, a small boy running away from her ran straight into a barbed wire fence and cut his leg. He bled. He was soon bandaged up again, and no harm was done. But the story went round that Martha had sent a duppy to chase him into the fence and to make him bleed, because she wanted to drink his blood. Martha herself was in a bad way. She was getting older and weaker and hungry all the time. Everyone looked at her with suspicion. The woman feared her, and the children hated her. She had no money, no sons or daughters to look after her, and her grandchildren had gone to America. She didn't know how to make ends meet. So when Mr. Bennet came to her one day and said, "Martha, I hear you're an obia woman," she didn't say no. And when he asked her to do him a favor, she didn't say, "Depends what it is." And she didn't say, "I can do it," She said, "How much are you going to pay me?" Mr. Bennet said he would pay her $1. So Martha made up her first spell. She took some blood from Mr. Bennet's finger, mixed it with cold ashes from her cooking place, pounded it with lizards' tails, and rolled the paste inside a croton leaf. She tied it up with coconut fiber and gave it to Mr. Bennet. He hung it on his orange tree. For the first time in years, nobody stole Mr. Bennet's oranges. The wind didn't blow them off, and the sun ripened them. All his oranges were sweet, and he got a good price for them in Port of Spain. So Martha became a witch, an obeah woman. More and more of the village came to her for help with their problems. A young girl wanted to catch a man. A man wanted to stop his neighbor's cow from eating his bananas. A woman wanted a healthy baby. Martha muttered away, made spells for them, and charged them each $1. The girl caught her man. The neighbor's cow ate deadly nightshade and died. The baby was born healthy. Martha raised her price to $2. Of course, not all her spells worked. Sometimes people weren't cured, sometimes their crops failed, sometimes their lovers deserted them. The funny thing about it is that nobody believed there was anything wrong with Martha's obeah. They believed instead that she had given a more powerful spell to someone else. No one was grateful to Martha. Everyone was afraid of her. When Louise Silver's baby died, that fear turned to hatred. One day, the baby had been bouncing in his bed, fat, jolly, and healthy as could be. The next day, he was dead. Then Miriam found out that Louise Silver's husband owed Martha $1. Martha had given him a spell for the health of the baby, and Louise Silver's husband hadn't paid her. There was no doubt about it. Miriam said old Martha had killed the baby for $1. What's more, said Miriam, no spell could have done it. Martha must be an old higg. Down by the river where they washed the clothes, the women talked about it. Some of them didn't even know what an old higg was. Such things were things of the past, from the days of superstition. Miriam knew, and she told others about it. An old higg is worse than a witch, more powerful than an obeah woman. An old higg knows all the terrible powers of darkness. By the mysterious muttering of spells, she has the power to shed her skin, to fly through the air as a ball of fire and come back to earth. She finds young children in their beds and sucks their blood. Miriam said that was what happened to Louise Silver's baby. Some of the women wanted to go straight to Martha's hut and accuse her of this terrible deed. Some didn't believe it was possible. Most of them were afraid. They were afraid that the old higg would strike again. They wanted to protect themselves and their children. Miriam, who knew all about it, told them what to do. First, they had to find white chalk and make crosses all around their houses. Their babies had to sleep in blue nightgowns. They had to put garlic on the floor around the babies' cots. And last of all, they had to leave a pile of rice on the floor, because an old higg cannot pass a heap of rice without stopping to count every grain. And even if she drops one grain, she must start again and count them all over again. It seemed to work for a couple of weeks. No one saw balls of fire by night, and all the children slept safe and well. Then Miriam's own baby got sick. The baby began to run a fever, to toss and to moan. When Miriam was trying to comfort her, she thought she saw 2 red marks on the baby's neck. That settles it, she thought. The old higg, Martha, had been drinking the baby's blood. There was only one thing to do, thought Miriam. Kill the old higg to save the baby's life. She went around the village and told her stories to the other women. They agreed. Defense was useless. It was no good just driving the old higg away. She could always return at night as a ball of fire. The old higg must die. Poor old Martha. There she was by her cooking place, boiling water to make some rice, when she heard angry voices. Looking up, she saw the women of the village marching towards her, armed with sticks and clubs. She could tell what mood they were in, and she knew she couldn't argue with them. So she said nothing. She squatted by her cooking pot, stirring slowly. She looked up again as they came closer and surrounded her, and they looked down into her wizened prune-like face. Martha let her mouth drop open to show her one tooth, and all the while one eye was still open while the other was twitching, twitching, twitching. The women were frightened. One minute they had been angry, shouting and waving sticks, and the next they were silent, frightened by the old Higue. Old Martha knew she was still in danger. If she made one wrong move, if she said the wrong thing, they would set upon her and beat her. "Go away," she croaked. Nobody moved. "Go away," she cried and shuffled toward them, knocking over the bag of rice, which all spilled out onto the ground. "Old Higue," said Miriam, "you must pick it up. You must pick it up and count every grain. That will prove you are an old Higue. You must pick it up and count every grain, and then we will kill you." Old Martha looked at the women, and she saw the hate in their eyes. They really believed she had killed a child and wanted to kill another. Martha said nothing. She started to pick up the rice and count the grains. 1, 2, 3, 4, she counted. The women watched. 365, 6, 7, she counted. The women watched. 832, 3, 4, 5, she counted. And then she dropped a grain and had to start all over again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, she counted. The women were beginning to get tired of watching her and listening to her monotonous old croak. 206, 7, 8, 9. The women were falling asleep. Martha looked up from her counting. The women were all asleep. Martha went into her hut to collect her few belongings. From under her bed, she took a bag of money, all the dollars she had saved from making spells. She walked out of the hut and past the sleeping women. She walked through the village of Cocory and took the road to Port of Spain. No one in the village ever saw her again or heard of her, and no one in the village ever knew whether she really was an old Higue or not. Some say she took the money, bought an airplane ticket, and went to see her grandchildren in America. The end. I hope you enjoyed that story, and until next time, happy reading.